The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to loosen the pitch mount. That'll allow us to raise the engine up a little bit higher, giving us more room to work with. Just note, sometimes putting back the intercooler can be a little bit annoying. Next, we're going to take off the headers to give us a little bit more room to work with. Note that when you're putting the headers back on later, it is a lot easier to put it back in 3 separate pieces than 1 piece. And then we're going to loosen the 2 engine mount nuts holding it to the subframe. Then you're going to want to carefully and slowly, making sure not to hit anything on the way up, jack the engine up at the transmission until the engine mount studs clear the subframe. For safety, work on one side of the engine at a time and brace the other side with a wood block. And also, sometimes it's not a bad idea to brace the transmission area as well. Okay, so we got the driver's side engine mount out, and here I am comparing it to the Group N STi mount that we're gonna go ahead and put in instead. Honestly, for 120,000 miles, the OEM engine mount is actually not that bad. I don't see any cracks or rips or anything like that. I've definitely pulled engine mounts off of cars around the same mileage, and they were just completely torn and separated. But overall, I mean, it's not looking too bad. We probably could have gotten away with it. But we have the Group N stuff, so let's go ahead and install that anyway. You can definitely feel that there's a little bit thicker and harder rubber on these Group N ones, which is exactly what it's supposed to be, that kind of middle ground between OEM and polyurethane. The Group N mounts also come with a new heat shield, so that's pretty cool as well. We just have to reuse those 2 nuts. And I'm also going to be doing this one side at a time, and then also be cognizant of the orientation that you pull it out, because it will have to go in that same direction. So something interesting that I noticed is, so this is the Group N mount, but I have the OEM heat shields on, right? And this is the Group N heat shield that comes with the mount. You can see that the OEM mount, so there's actually 2. This is the passenger side. It actually has a heat shield on the bottom, and then also a heat shield on the top. But you'll notice that the OEM heat shields actually extend all the way down and actually cover the engine mount, while the Group N mount actually would leave the engine mount exposed. So I'm not sure, like, I'm sure it's probably fine, because why would they give this if it was, you know, gonna be detrimental to the engine mount? But I do like the idea of extra heat shielding just to make the rubber last a little bit longer. So I think I'm gonna reuse the OEM mounts. Hopefully that works out, but I'm sure, again, either way is probably fine. Now, overall, doing the engine mounts actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but a few things are really going to help your experience. First thing is, obviously, you want to take off the exhaust manifold and take off the headers. It's going to give you a lot more room to work with, and it's really not that difficult to do, so do that first. Second, jacking the engine up pretty much as high as you can, you know, without damaging anything. Again, the more room, the better. And the third thing is going to be getting one of these. I'll leave a link in the description below. Basically, it's a ratcheting wrench. 14 mil is what you're going to need, because that's the size for the engine mounts. But this is going to be for those back bolts that are super hard to get to. I'd imagine the job might be almost near impossible without it. So highly recommend you get one of these. And the way that I did it was basically sticking it through one end, right? So this is coming from, if your feet are facing the front of the car, you kind of slide this through like right over the top of the steering rack, and then you can slide your other hand the other direction to help hold it on and then break it loose. So you're gonna have to kind of like use the tool from one end, your hand from the other end, but you'll figure it out. So while tightening the engine mount nuts, I kind of messed them up a little bit and figured, no problem, they're cheap. I'll head down to the Subaru dealership and pick 2 brand new OEM ones. Then I started to tighten those down to the service manual's recommended like 60 or so foot-pounds of torque. Well, let's just say I didn't quite get all the way. I started to notice that the nuts were actually getting easier to turn instead of harder as I torqued them down, so I knew something was wrong. I began thinking to myself, oh man, I just messed up like $300 worth of mounts. Okay, so a positive update finally. I took the engine mounts out of the car car again and did another double check. And it turns out that it's actually these brand new OEM nuts that actually ended up stripping, not the bolt itself on the engine mounts. So that's good. That means the engine mounts are still good. It sucked I had to put them on, take them off, put them back on, but just ran to Home Depot, got some M10 by 1.25 flange nuts, put them on, torqued them down to a little bit of a lower 45 foot-pounds because that seems to be kind of what, you know, the newer STIs are running. And I mean, frankly, it's the same engine, so I can't imagine why there would be a difference. But I think the dealership replaced probably the original, you know, OEM nuts that maybe could handle the torque up to 62, but these new ones can only handle torque up to like 40. So that's what I'm going with. I'm glad it's on, torqued it down, threw a little blue thread locker just in case to make sure it doesn't come loose, but we can finally put the car back together now.